The coziness of our tiny rented flat and the warmth of my father's grin are ingrained in my earliest memories. My name is Carla, and up until the age of 13, my life was just typical, in the greatest sense of the word. James, my father, was the type of man who turned everything into an adventure. Despite our little apartment, he transformed our living room into a fort on wet weekends and our small balcony into a fairy garden. Sarah, Mom, was different. She was more reserved and constantly wished for a larger home and a more opulent lifestyle. However, in those days, their differences seemed to perfectly balance each other out. "Carla, sweetie, would you like to spend the weekend at Grandpa's?" Mom would frequently inquire. I would seize the opportunity because Grandpa Richard's house seemed like a second home to me, not because I didn't want to be home. There were many nooks and crannies to discover in this lovely two-story Victorian home with groaning oak flooring. Grandpa would smile knowingly and explain, "Your mother needs her alone time with your father," when I would show up at his house, "and I need my time with my favorite granddaughter." More than the grown-ups around me recognized, I was a perceptive child. I realized that Mom and Dad had their own connection to maintain, and that she occasionally needed distance. I was not harmed by it. If nothing else, it gave me a sense of maturity. Besides, they were amazing weekends spent with Grandpa. He would prepare the best pancakes in the world, teach me about money management — he was a retired bank manager — and share anecdotes of Dad's early years. He once told me, "You know, Carla," as we sat on his veranda eating breakfast, "your mother dreams of a house like this. However, do you know what matters more than a large home? A loving household." Understood even at that young age, and nodded. Despite its small size, our flat was brimming with affection. When Dad got home from work at the insurance firm, he would embrace me and kiss Mom until she giggled in spite of herself. During those moments, our small room seemed endless. However, unexpected changes might happen in life. Dad started losing weight quickly when I was 13. His eyes conveyed a different message than his initial jest about finally being in shape. Mom's face became more anxious as the frequency of the doctor's visits increased. Every week, my dad would ruffle my hair and say, "It's just a phase. I'll be back to my old self in no time." However, he wasn't. He was engulfed like a wildfire by the illness, severe pancreatic cancer. My father, who used to be robust and energetic, disappeared in a matter of months. I could witness Mom's internal disintegration as I watched helplessly as she attempted to keep everything together. I will never be able to forget the last time I spoke to Dad. His hand was hardly strong enough to clasp mine as he lay in his hospital bed. He murmured, "Look after your mother for me, Princess, and follow Grandpa's instructions. He is smarter than the rest of us put together." Living in a fog was how I described the year following Dad's passing. Mom became so depressed that she was hardly able to look at me. I suppose I made her think of him too much. I'm really grateful for Grandpa Richard. In the maelstrom that had become our life, he became my rock and my haven. Living at Grandpa's place became my new normal and was no longer merely a stopgap measure. I used to wake up every morning in what was formerly Dad's old room, surrounded by pictures and awards from his early years. Grandpa did his best to replace the vacuum left by both of my parents' deaths, one via death, the other through grief, by making sure I continued to attend school and helping me with my homework. Sometimes Mom would call, but her voice always sounded aloof and uninterested. Her visits were increasingly less frequent. She would hardly look at me before hurried away. I made the decision to lower my expectations. Then, exactly 1 year and 2 months after Dad's death, everything changed. Mom showed up at Grandpa's door one sunny Saturday morning, and I almost didn't recognize her. Gone was the grieving widow in black, replaced by someone wearing a bright yellow dress and sporting a new haircut. Her face was glowing with happiness. "Carla, sweetie, pack your things. You're coming home," she announced, bouncing on her heels like a teenager. I looked at Grandpa, confused. He seemed just as surprised as I was. The drive back to our apartment was filled with Mom's cheerful chatter about everything and nothing. It was like sitting next to a stranger who happened to look like my mother. But the real shock came when we walked through our apartment door. There, in our small living room, stood a tall man and a girl who looked about 3 years younger than me. They both smiled awkwardly as Mom practically danced their side. "Carla, meet Robert and his daughter, Emma. Robert is my fiancé, and Emma will be your new sister. We're getting married soon." Mom beamed, clutching Robert's arm. The room started spinning. "What? When did this happen?" "Oh, we've been dating for a while now." Mom waved her hand dismissively. "I didn't tell anyone about our relationship. You know how people can get jealous and judgmental. It was better this way." I stumbled to my old room, barely registering that it had been redecorated. With trembling hands, I pulled out my phone and called Grandpa. He answered on the first ring. "Mom has a fiancé," I whispered into the phone. "She's getting married and didn't tell anyone. There's a man here and his daughter." Grandpa arrived within 20 minutes. I could hear the conversation from my room as he confronted Mom. "Sarah, how could you do this without telling anyone? Without telling your own daughter?" "I'm happy for the first time in forever." Mom's voice was defensive. "I've decided to start fresh, to live again. James would want that. He wouldn't want me to waste away in depression forever." There was a long pause before Grandpa spoke again, his voice heavy with resignation. "Hope you'll be happy, Sarah. Just don't forget you have a daughter who needs you too." The 3 months before the wedding were like living in some twisted alternate reality. Our small apartment felt even more cramped with 4 people instead of 2. But that wasn't the worst part. What really got to me was watching Emma, my new stepsister, wrap my mother around her finger. "Mom, can you help me with my hair?" Emma would say, and my mother would drop everything, including our conversation, to assist her. The way she said "Mom" made my skin crawl, especially since she'd only known my mother for a few months. Mom seemed blind to everything except Emma. When Emma mentioned she loved ballet, Mom immediately signed her up for private lessons, something I'd begged for years ago, but was told we couldn't afford. When Emma complained about her old phone being too slow, Mom bought her the latest iPhone model. When Emma wanted to redecorate her side of the bedroom we now shared, Mom took her shopping and spent hundreds of dollars on new bedding, curtains, and decorations. "Your sister needs to feel welcome here," Mom would say whenever I tried to point out the disparity in treatment. "Stepsister," I'd correct her, "and I need to feel welcome too." She'd just shake her head and walk away. The wedding day itself was a modest affair at a local venue, but Mom glowed with happiness. I stood there in my bridesmaid dress, watching as she fussed over Emma's hair and makeup, barely sparing me a glance. Throughout the ceremony and reception, Mom kept Emma close, holding her hand and introducing her to everyone as my beautiful daughter. I might as well have been a waitress for all the attention I received. Grandpa gave them a check for $5,000 as a wedding gift, a generous amount by any standard. But I overheard Mom's reaction when she cornered him by the restrooms. "Really, Dad? A check?" she hissed, her face flushed from champagne and anger. "I was counting on you giving us your house. We're a proper family now. We need the space. That apartment is too small for 4 people. Grandpa remained calm, though I could see the disappointment in his eyes. "Sarah, you're rushing everything. First the sudden engagement, now this. That house isn't just property to be handed over on a whim. Besides, it's where Carla spends half her time now." "Oh, so that's it. You're playing favorites now?" "No, I'm being practical, and maybe you should be too." I slipped away before they could notice me, but the conversation haunted me. My mother had changed so much that I barely recognized her anymore. She created this new perfect family in her mind, with Emma as the star child and Robert as the ideal husband. There didn't seem to be any room left for me. So I did what any unwanted person would do. I spent more and more time at Grandpa's house. At least there, I didn't have to pretend to be happy about being replaced. 4 years passed since that moment, and I was about to graduate from high school. Living in that apartment had become a masterclass in avoiding conflict. I'd learned to be quiet, to take up as little space as possible, and to spend most of my time either in my room or at Grandpa's. One evening during our weekly family dinner, another exercise in pretending we were one big happy family, I decided to share my plans for the future. "I've been accepted to State University," I announced, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want to study finance and business management." The silence that followed was deafening. Mom put down her fork, exchanged a look with Robert, and cleared her throat. "Actually, Carla, I think it would be better if you started working after graduation. College isn't necessary for everyone." I stared at her, bewildered. "What are you talking about? Dad set up a college fund for me before he died. He always wanted me to get higher education." Mom shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "About that fund, Robert and I have been talking, and we think it would be better to save that money for Emma's education. She's incredibly talented, you know, top of her class and everything. She'll need a good university education to reach her full potential." Robert nodded sagely. "Emma has shown remarkable aptitude in her studies. It would be the right thing to do, Carla. You could work for a few years, save up, and then go to college if you still want to." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The college fund, the last gift my father had arranged for me, they wanted to take that too. "That money is mine," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "Dad left it specifically for my education. You can't just give it to Emma." "Don't be selfish, Carla," Mom said, her eyes filling with tears. "Emma is your sister." "Stepsister," I snapped, standing up so quickly my chair fell backward. "And that money is the last thing I have from Dad. You've given her everything else, my room, your attention, your love, but you can't have this. I won't let you take it." "How dare you?" Mom was crying now, but I could see the manipulation in her tears. "After everything we've done for you. Emma needs. What about what I need? What about what Dad wanted for me?" The argument ended with doors slamming and tears, mostly Mom's, as she wailed about my selfishness. After that night, the apartment became even more hostile. No one spoke to me unless absolutely necessary. Emma would smirk whenever she passed me in the hallway, and Robert wouldn't even look in my direction. When graduation day came, I wasn't surprised to find only Grandpa in the audience. He cheered loud enough for 4 people when they called my name, and his proud smile meant more to me than anything my new family could have offered. That evening, I packed everything I owned into 3 cardboard boxes and my old suitcase. Grandpa helped me load them into his car. "Your room is always ready for you, sweetheart," he said as we drove away from the apartment. "Always has been. Always will be." I didn't look back as we left. There was nothing there for me anymore. College life became my escape. I threw myself into my studies, determined to make my father and Grandpa proud. The business and finance courses fascinated me, and I found myself excelling in ways that would have made Dad smile. Every evening, I'd call Grandpa to share what I'd learned. "Tell me again about derivatives," he'd say, even though he knew more about finance than my professors. "I love hearing you explain it." But as my college years progressed, I noticed changes in Grandpa's voice during our calls. He got tired more easily, and his usual sharp wit sometimes seemed dulled. During my visits home, I caught him wincing when he stood up or rubbing his chest when he thought I wasn't looking. "It's just age catching up with me," he'd say whenever I asked about his health. "Nothing to worry about, sweetheart." But I did worry. I started calling him twice a day instead of once and drove home every weekend I could, not just on holidays. We'd sit in his kitchen, drinking tea and talking about everything and nothing, just like we used to. Sometimes I'd catch him looking at me with such intense love that it made my throat tighten. It was the middle of my final semester when Mom called. I almost didn't answer. It was the first time she'd called in 4 years, but something made me pick up. "Grandpa died last night," she said, her voice flat and emotionless. "The funeral is on Thursday at 2 p.m., Hartford Funeral Home." The phone slipped from my hand. I don't remember much of what happened next, just that my roommate found me curled up on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Thursday came too quickly and not quickly enough. The funeral home was exactly the kind of place Grandpa would have chosen, understated but elegant, with large windows letting in natural light. I arrived early, my black dress feeling too tight, my skin too sensitive, everything wrong, because Grandpa wasn't there to make it right. I expected to see Mom and her family, but they weren't there. Instead, Mr. Harrison, Grandpa's friend from his banking days, was organizing everything. "They're running a bit late," he said when I asked. "Your mother called to say they'd be delayed." The service was beautiful, filled with people from Grandpa's life sharing stories about his kindness, integrity, and humor. I sat in the front row, alone with my grief, until halfway through the service, when I heard the back door open. Mom swept in with Robert and Emma, all in perfectly coordinated black outfits. They took seats in the far back, and Mom didn't even glance in my direction. Her face was set in a mask of appropriate grief, but her eyes were already darting around the room, assessing, calculating. I turned back to face the front, my tears now burning with both grief and anger. Even here, even now, she couldn't acknowledge me. She couldn't put aside her pettiness for one day to mourn her own father. After the funeral, I drove to Grandpa's house, my home for the past 4 years, only to stop short at the sight that greeted me. Scattered across the front lawn like worthless debris were garbage bags filled with my belongings. My clothes, my books, my photo albums, everything from my room had been unceremoniously thrown out. Some bags had split open, spilling my life across the grass. With trembling hands, I tried my key in the front door. It wouldn't turn. The lock had been changed. I was still standing there, my key useless in my hand, when the door swung open. Mom stood in the doorway, wearing the same black dress from the funeral, but now with an expression of triumph rather than grief. "Oh, good, you're here to collect your things," she said, as if she were doing me a favor. "This is my house now. Dad's finally gone, and as his only child, I'm the rightful heir. I've already had the locks changed. We're moving in tonight." I stared at her, unable to process the cruelty of it all. "You couldn't even wait until after the funeral." "These are my things. My home." "No, this is my home now," she cut me off sharply. "And you better take your stuff quickly, or it's going in the dumpster. I need to clear the space for Emma's things." She smiled coldly. "She's getting your old room, by the way. She's always wanted a bigger bedroom." I felt numb as I gathered my belongings, stuffing everything back into the torn bags, trying to collect the scattered photos of Dad and Grandpa from where they'd fallen in the grass. My mother stood in the doorway the entire time, watching me like a security guard, making sure I didn't try to steal anything. The drive back to my college dorm was a blur of tears and disbelief. My roommate helped me carry everything up, not asking questions when she saw my state. A week later, I received a call from a law firm. "Miss Johnson, this is Mr. Anderson from Anderson and Partners Law Firm. I'm your grandfather's notary. We need you to come in for the reading of his will. Would Thursday at 10 a.m. work for you?" I agreed, though I couldn't see the point. Mom had made it clear she was the heir to everything. When I arrived at the notary's office that Thursday, Mom, Robert, and Emma were already there, seated like royalty in the leather chairs. Emma was examining her manicure while Robert scrolled through his phone. Mom's eyes narrowed when she saw me. "What are you doing here?" she asked, loudly enough for everyone in the office to hear. "You're clearly not needed for this. We're handling family business." Mr. Anderson adjusted his glasses and began reading from the document in front of him. "I, Richard James Mitchell, being of sound mind and body, declare this to be my last will and testament." He started with the formal language, but I saw Mom already smiling triumphantly. That smile froze when Mr. Anderson continued. "To my beloved granddaughter, Carla Johnson, I leave my house at 1542 Oak Street, along with all its contents and my entire savings account containing $475,000. The room went deadly silent for a moment. Then Mom's voice shattered it. "What? This can't be right." She snatched the document from Mr. Anderson's hands, her eyes scanning frantically. "Where's my part? I'm his daughter." Mr. Anderson calmly retrieved the will. "Mrs. Waters, your father's wishes are quite clear. He leaves everything to Miss Carla Johnson. There is no provision for you in the will." "This is impossible." Mom's face had turned scarlet. "She manipulated him. She poisoned him against me. I'll sue. I'll contest this will." "The will is ironclad," Mr. Anderson stated firmly. "Your father had it properly witnessed and notarized 6 months ago. He was of completely sound mind, as attested by his doctor. Any attempt to contest it would be futile and expensive." Mom's strategy suddenly shifted. The rage in her eyes transformed into tears as she turned to me. "Carla, sweetie, please," she pleaded, her voice honey-sweet now. "We've already given up our apartment. We moved everything out yesterday. We have nowhere to go. You can't just throw us out on the street. We're family." I stood up, holding the folder Mr. Anderson had just handed me. Inside were the deed to the house, ownership transfer documents, and all the legal paperwork confirming my ownership of the property. "Family?" I asked quietly. "Like how you threw my belongings onto the lawn before Grandpa was even in his grave. Like how you tried to steal my college fund. Like how you've treated me for the past 4 years. That was different. This is your problem, not mine." I cut her off, turning to leave. "I suggest you start looking for a new apartment." I drove straight to Grandpa's house, my house now, but I couldn't get in. I pulled out my phone and called a locksmith, explaining the situation. When he arrived, I showed him my freshly notarized ownership documents. "I'm the legal owner of this house," I explained, showing him the paperwork. "I need you to open these locks and then change them to new ones. I want to be the only one with the keys." As the locksmith worked, I gathered up everything that belonged to Mom, Robert, and Emma. All the clothes they'd already unpacked. Their toiletries from the bathrooms. Emma's posters she'd already stuck to my old bedroom wall. I loaded it all into garbage bags, just as they'd done with my things. When the locksmith finished and handed me the new keys, I dragged all their bags onto the front porch and arranged them neatly. The symmetry of the situation wasn't lost on me. Their belongings, now set where mine had been just days ago. As the sun began to set, I heard the familiar sound of Mom's car pulling into the driveway. I watched through the living room window, Grandpa's favorite spot to read his morning paper, as their reactions played out exactly as I'd expected. "What is this?" Mom's shriek could be heard clearly through the closed windows. "Our things, all our things are outside." I opened the door but stood firmly in the doorway as they approached. Mom's face was red with fury. Robert looked like he'd swallowed something sour. Emma was already crying theatrical tears. "How dare you?" Mom stormed up the porch steps. "We live here now. You can't do this to us." "Actually, I can. This is my house now, legally and rightfully. You need to take your belongings and leave." We have nowhere to go." Emma wailed. "You should have thought about that before giving up your apartment," I replied coolly. "Not my problem. Mom tried to push past me into the house, but I stood my ground." "Move, Carla. This is ridiculous. This is my father's house." "No, it's my house now. And if you don't leave immediately with your things, I'm calling the police to report you for trespassing. After that, all these bags go straight to the dumpster." I pulled out my phone. "Your choice, Mom. Just like you gave me a choice about my things a few days ago, remember?" The next few minutes were filled with cursing and threats as they gathered their bags. Mom alternated between crying and screaming about how unfair it all was. Emma kept saying I'd regret this. Robert muttered under his breath about contesting the will. As they loaded the last bag into their car, Mom turned to me one final time. "You're no daughter of mine. Your father would be ashamed of you." I smiled sadly. "No, Mom. The fact that I finally advocated for myself would make my father proud. Goodbye." Their car vanished around the bend as I watched them drive off. 6 months have passed since then. I'm currently in my last semester and will graduate with honors. A charming young family is renting the house. Grandpa would have been pleased to see me save money from their rent payments each month. That first night, when everyone had gone, I discovered his note in the study safe. It said, "My dearest Carlo, first." You have already dealt with your mother's response to my will if you are reading this. I apologize for putting you through that, but I was too familiar with Sarah. I was aware of her intended course of action. You possess both my business acumen and your father's honesty. Make good use of both. You can do whatever you want with the house. Just swear to me that you will not remove the family pictures from the attic. Some memories, even the unpleasant ones, are worth preserving. Fulfilled that promise as well as the others I had given to Dad and to him. I'm letting go of the past while holding on to the lessons it taught me, and I'm now concentrating on the future. Family isn't always what you were born into. Occasionally it's who has faith in you, who keeps you safe, who fosters your development. Somewhere in the city, Mom, Robert, and Emma still reside. I've heard that they eventually got a new flat. They've made a few attempts to get in touch with me, generally when they're in need of anything. However, I don't answer. We should close some chapters of our existence.
Hi, I'm Jennifer. At 32, I'd worked hard to climb the corporate ladder and was proud to call myself an executive at one of Chicago's top marketing firms, earning $195,000 a year. Life was good, until I met Frank Henderson at a real estate conference. "You're the most driven woman I've ever met," he'd say, flashing that dazzling smile that made me forget all my doubts. We got married after a year of dating, and I thought my life couldn't get any better. That's when I met them, Frank's 5 sisters, all divorced and raising kids. At first, they were just scattered voices at family gatherings. "My ex is such a deadbeat," Laura would complain, her 2 kids leaving sticky fingerprints all over my freshly decorated living room. "At least yours pays child support," Barbara would chime in, bouncing a fussy toddler on her hip. They'd smile at me and say, "You're so lucky to have such a successful career, Jennifer." But behind those words, their eyes betrayed something else. Envy, resentment, maybe both. My best friend Kate was the first to notice the cracks. Over lunch one day, she leaned in, her lawyer instincts kicking in. "Why does Frank need access to your personal savings? You already have a joint account." I waved her off. "He's just helping manage our finances better." But things started to shift. Subtly at first. "Babe, you should be home earlier," Frank would say. Laura needed help with her kids' homework today. Then it became a constant refrain. "Family takes care of family, Jennifer. The girls need our support right now." One night, while sorting through bills, I saw a $500 transferred to Barbara's account. "She needed help with rent," Frank said casually. "We can't let her and the kid end up on the street." "That's the 3rd time this month." I snapped. "Are you saying my family isn't worth helping?" His voice turned sharp. You make good money, Jennifer. We should share our blessings. I wanted to believe him, to see his concern as love. But the calls, visits, and financial demands kept piling up. I started to feel more like a human ATM than a sister-in-law. Things escalated one night over dinner. I found the perfect houses for all the girls, Frank announced, within 2 blocks of us. Isn't that great? I nearly choked on my wine. All of them? How can they afford that? Don't worry about it. I worked out a deal through my real estate connections. Within a month, they all moved in. That's when my nightmare truly began. Jennifer, can you watch the kids? I have a job interview. Laura would text at 7 o'clock a.m. Emergency, can you pick up the kids from school? Rachel would call during my meetings. One morning, I walked into the kitchen to find Barbara cooking breakfast. Frank gave me a key for emergencies, she said with a grin. I confronted Frank that evening. This is getting out of hand. I can't focus on work with all this chaos. Maybe that's for the best, he replied coldly. The kids need a proper aunt figure. You make enough money for all of us anyway. All of us? My voice shook. It all unraveled from there. My savings had been drained through multiple family support transfers. Frank had used my credit cards to furnish his sister's homes. When I confronted him, his charming mask slipped. You're part of this family now, he growled. Stop acting like some stuck-up princess. The final blow came during a major presentation at work. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Emergency, Maria's kids are sick. You need to come home now. Panicked, I left mid-presentation, only to find Maria lounging on my couch. Oh, they're fine now, she said, smirking. That night, Frank dropped the bomb. You need to quit your job. The girls need help with the kids. Absolutely not, I shot back. His face twisted into something unrecognizable. You ungrateful witch. After everything I've done for you. Done for me? I screamed. You've stolen my savings and ruined my life. It's called sharing, Jennifer. You wouldn't understand with your career-first attitude. What kind of woman are you? In tears, I called Kate that night. Something's not right, she said firmly. This isn't love, it's control. Start documenting everything and keep any evidence you can. My once pristine home had turned into a chaotic daycare. My career was barely hanging on. I had anxiety attacks in bathroom stalls, my boss asking if everything was okay. Just family stuff, I lied. But it wasn't just family stuff. It was the systematic destruction of everything I'd built. My independence, my career, my sanity, all sacrificed on the altar of Frank's family-first manipulation. I didn't know it then, but Frank was playing a much bigger game. The houses, the money, the constant chaos. It was all part of a grander scheme, one that would soon blow up in all our faces. Everything unraveled late one sleepless night. On a hunch, I decided to dig deeper into our financial records. What I found made my blood run cold. Wait, what's this loan document with my signature? I never signed for a $50,000 loan. The more I searched, the worse it got. While Frank was out showing houses, I scoured his home office, uncovering bank statements, loan documents, and client contracts. Together, they painted a chilling picture of an elaborate real estate scam. Then came the text. My phone buzzed with a message from Karen, clearly sent by mistake. Isabel is such a fool. Can't believe she hasn't figured out what we're doing with the house deposits yet. Another ping. This time from Rachel. Frank says once everything falls apart, she'll take the blame since her name's on the documents. My hands trembled as nausea hit me like a wave. I called Kate, choking on my words. Don't react, she instructed. Meet me at the coffee shop across from my office. Now. At the cafe, I showed her everything. Look at these loan documents, that's not my signature. And these client deposits, they're going straight into personal accounts. Kate's face darkened. This is major fraud, Jennifer, and they're setting you up to take the fall. That evening, I overheard the sisters in my kitchen, their voices dripping with mockery. Poor Jennifer. So career-obsessed, she doesn't even notice what's happening in her own house. Remember when she actually believed we needed childcare? Rachel snickered. As if we couldn't afford nannies with all this cash flowing in. I stepped into view and their fake smiles froze on their faces. Oh, Jennifer, we were just. Save it, I said flatly, disgusted. Later that night, I confronted Frank with the evidence. You forged my signature. You're stealing client deposits. This is fraud. His response chilled me to the core. Listen carefully, he hissed. One word to anyone and you'll regret it. Besides, whose name is on all those documents? Not mine. Everything I've done was for family, he spat. You're just collateral damage. I acted scared, submissive, but inside, I was done. The next day, during a family gathering, I overheard Maria on the phone. Yeah, the perfect setup. Frank made sure Jennifer's name is on everything. When it all crashes, she'll take the fall. Poor workaholic wife, secretly stealing from clients to support her husband's struggling sisters. Laura chimed in, laughing. The best part? She actually thinks she's helping family. Wait till she finds out we've been living off client deposits this whole time. I slipped away to call Kate. It's worse than we thought, I whispered. They're running a full-scale fraud operation, and I'm their scapegoat. I've been documenting everything, Kate replied, her tone resolute. But we need to move fast. They're getting sloppy, which means they're close to their endgame. That night, I lay in bed next to Frank, my heart racing. The man I married was a stranger. His sisters weren't victims. They were accomplices. And I was their perfect patsy, the successful career woman primed to take the fall. But they didn't know one thing. I had a plan of my own. The morning I executed my escape plan started like any other. Don't forget, Laura's kids need picking up at 3, Frank reminded me, his voice casual. Of course, honey, I said with a smile. Little did he know, I'd never be doing your school runs again. I had spent weeks secretly copying every incriminating document, recording conversations on my phone. The day before, I'd accepted a VP position at a marketing firm in Boston, an upgrade from my current role and 1,000 miles away from this chaos. Meeting Kate at her law firm, we put the final pieces in place. The fraud investigators have everything they need, she confirmed. They'll move once you're safely away. And the restraining order? I asked, my voice wavering. With the evidence of his threats. I had just finished clearing out my office when my phone exploded with notifications. You backstabbing witch, Frank's text read. The real estate board just showed up. A message from Laura followed. How dare you? They're investigating our benefits. I blocked them all and boarded my flight to Boston. Within weeks, everything imploded. Kate kept me updated. Frank's biggest clients are suing for millions, she said during one call. And the sisters' welfare fraud got exposed during the investigation. They're all being evicted. I settled into my new apartment overlooking the Boston Harbor. My new job valued my expertise, and for the first time in years, I felt free. Then the desperate calls started. Baby, please, I can explain everything. I'll change. Jennifer, we're family. We made mistakes, but we need you. I sent all the calls to voicemail. Months later, I read about Frank losing his real estate license. His sisters, no longer able to coast on fraud and welfare, had to find actual jobs. Frank faced tax evasion charges that would keep him occupied for years. Kate called one afternoon. Your divorce is final, she said triumphantly. And guess what? Frank just got served with federal tax evasion charges. And the sisters? I asked. Working minimum wage jobs. Turns out, fraud doesn't look good on our resume. With part of my new salary, I launched a foundation to help women recognize and escape financial abuse. During our first meeting, I shared my story. I thought I was alone, one woman said, tears in her eyes. Thank you for showing us there's a way out. Last week, I received a letter from Maria. We're truly sorry, we were horrible people. Please forgive us. I dropped it in the shredder without responding. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Kate. Just drove past your old house. For sale by bank sign up. Karma's really doing her thing. Standing by my window, watching the sunset over Boston Harbor, I smiled. My new life was everything I had worked for, and more. No toxic family, no manipulation, no drama. Just me, my career, and my freedom. Justice doesn't always need revenge. Sometimes it just needs time and truth. To all the women trapped in toxic families and relationships, I want you to know this. There's always a way out. Be smart, be brave, and most importantly, be ready to choose yourself.